I must say that I feel absolutely blessed to make this video as we conclude this Bible study on the book of Hebrews. After we finish the first 10 chapters of this book, it should be very clear on what has actually changed in this new covenant. These people say that we don't understand that there's a new and old covenant. But the actual problem is that in Christianity, they want us to believe that when it says new covenant, it means that everything about the culture and the way of Israel has changed, and the whole law is done away with, and now you can live how you feel in your heart. And as long as you believe in Jesus, you're good. You can celebrate him on pagan holidays. You can change the Sabbath day from the seventh to what they call the eighth day, which is Sunday, which they call the Lord's Day. You can change his name and actually remove our Father's name for a title, and it's still all good. You can do all these things and never have an issue. But you know what? You know when you have an issue? You have an issue when you start keeping Yah's law and start obeying his commands. Everything else you will be in good standing for, but keeping the commandments will send you to hell. That's what they believe. I am often bothered by the arrogance and pride of most Christians. But with this one man that I have displayed throughout this series, I'm actually very happy about his pride and the boldness he spoke in, because it has allowed me to show the extreme example of how false this religion is. This man, who is one of the biggest promoters of once saved, always saved, because of this extreme hypocritical view about the law, he shows his hypocrisy, because no matter what, he has proved that once saved, always saved is not true, because even he believes that there is a reason that Yah will reject you. So if a person was saved in his eyes, but then they decided that they're going to keep the law, now this person is no longer saved. And that is a direct example against his once saved, always saved belief. Now, his reasoning is obviously crazy, but it shows the true arrogance and hypocrisy that Satan will speak through, just because of how much he hates Yah's commandments and those who actually follow them. Christians hate Yah's commandments, though they want to say that they love Yah. They hate the Sabbath day because, as Yah says in Exodus chapter 31, speak also to the children of Israel, saying, surely my Sabbaths you shall keep, for it is a sign between me and you throughout your generations, that you may know that I am Yahuwah who sanctifies you. Exodus chapter 31, verse 13. So when we set ourselves apart from this world and keep Yah's fourth commandment, it is one major reason and sign that we are attached to Yah. And who is it that you believe will be completely against that? Yeah, that's right, Satan. And so he has been very successful in these times of the Gentiles, promoting this lawless faith for those who love religion more than the word, and they don't study to show themselves approved. But now that Yahuwah awakened the dry bones, Satan's lies are on the last legs, because we, the children of Israel, will not stand for them any longer, regardless of how many people try to come against us. So we know time is up on all this. And to prove the influence of Satan, we don't have to do backflips or hurdles. All we have to do is just read the word. And that is what this series was all about proving. I'm just reading the Bible to you and going over a book a majority of the Christian church has ignored. And if you don't believe me, just test it out for yourself and ask Christian friends and family to summarize this book. Ask them simply what the change in the law was, or what was the fault in the law. Just ask them. I hope by now you know the answer to these questions. If you don't, please go back to the other parts and gain clarity, and read this book over and over until you understand. But yes, we are at the end of Hebrews, and we can bring in clarity and then conclude this series. So let's finish this Bible study on the book of Hebrews. Let's begin. Okay, so we are now about to read the last 3 chapters. As you read this, you will now see the writer is bringing an application of this truth to those reading the letter. He is now exhorting these Hebrews to understand the importance of faith. Remember, as we ended chapter 10, the writer writes, now the just shall live by faith, but if anyone draws back, my soul has no pleasure in him. Hebrews chapter 10, verse 38. Going back to the words of the prophet Habakkuk in chapter 2, verse 4. Behold the proud, his soul is not upright in him, but the just shall live by his faith. Habakkuk chapter 2, verse 4. Yes, he ends that chapter in this way because now he has explained how this covenant works, and those who live in this truth are going to need to walk in faith. These Yahudim believers in Messiah that this letter was addressed to, they were discouraged. You have to understand that this was a completely new faith and idea that was being presented, and it was not met by the religious leaders with acceptance. They wanted to squash this faith and remove it from the land. And so these believers were being challenged, and keeping the faith was becoming difficult for them. Again, they were setting aside centuries of tradition and now believing that the blood of Messiah was going to provide atonement for them when they were all under a system that told them that they had to do it one way. You see, in Christianity, they rarely have you look at this faith from the perspective of the Hebrews. You just look at it from the perspective of Christians. And that's one of the main reasons why Christians don't truly understand this faith. These Yahudim, they were trailblazers. They were believing in something new. I mean, today, this is what we all believe. We believe that the blood of Messiah paid the debt for our sins. This is what even the tares believe this. But for them back then, you have to understand that this idea, it was a little radical and risky. Imagine always having a system that atoned for your sins before Yah. You knew exactly what you were doing that atoned for your sins. Everyone in your history up until this point believed in a certain way, and it was the law. But now, after the one they all believed was the prophesied Mashiach, now that he came and he died and then resurrected, now they are told that they're going to find atonement through belief in him and his sacrifice. Put yourself in their shoes. Back then, that would be kind of risky if you did not truly have faith. When you actually look at it through their eyes and what they were going through, and not modern religion, it can help you understand the word and what you're reading. Stop applying it from the way religion has taught you, but look at the audience and understand why they're receiving this letter and what their challenges and the struggles were. You know, the ironic thing is that many of us are going through the same thing, but it's a lot easier because we have the word right here. And the hard part for us is actually following what the word actually says, or do we follow religion and arrogant false teachers like this guy? We are up against the same challenges though. We're going up against the religion that everyone else around us grew up under and choosing to truly worship Yah according to his word. And because we do this, the others, they hate us for it. But just look back at those times and put yourself in their shoes. What they were doing was even more risky because they had the Torah and they were already living under this law. And they had the method. They were told that if they messed up, this is how they atoned with Yah. They were told that they went to the Levitical priest to receive forgiveness from Yah. But now, this new belief in Yahusha is now telling them that they no longer need to go to the Levitical priest. And they need to live by faith now, not by works. Not by works of the law, trying to obtain redemption by sacrificing goats and rams, but by faith, believing that the blood of Messiah really covers them and redeems them. And that is truly walking in faith. Instead of believing in the blood of the goats and the rams, now you're actually believing in Messiah and his blood. Christians have never had to consider this. They have never tried to obtain salvation through those types of works of the law. They never tried to sacrifice rams and goats for salvation. And with their false application of works of the law being good deeds, they have actually made it that works. Actually, to them, it means good deeds, meaning doing his commands that were written in stone. That's what they consider works of the law to be. When this is not anything of the sort, it is a completely different faith than what these Hebrews back then dealt with. You have to understand, many of these converts were experiencing persecution for their faith. Remember, men like Paul were persecuting them for these beliefs. Many of the converts were ready to turn back and leave these uneasy, uncharted waters of faith and just ready to go back to their comfortable, familiar life of obtaining atonement through the works of the law. I mean, it's much easier to do things the way everyone around you has been doing things for years. If you sin, you go to the temple, you go to the Levitical priest, and you offer up a sacrifice. This is what everyone did. So for them now to say, we're going to believe in Yahusha for our atonement, it's a major thing. It's a major change. It requires faith. Because what if you're wrong? What if the way you're applying this and these prophecies is wrong? The choice that they faced was depending on the works of the law or trusting in their belief in atonement through Yahusha's sacrifice. They had to trust that Yah was going to accept them, though they were going against the law of their people, going against the Torah, which was the law of the land. Again, it's completely like what many of us are going through. Today, we are up against false religious leaders that don't truly believe, but as long as they keep us in their falsehoods, it makes them feel elevated. Now, we want to turn back to Yah, and we want to keep his commandments. We want to go back to his Torah and be obedient. And these Christians are not having it. They want to speak against us, call us a cult, place labels around us, all these things. And we are like these Hebrews, all going against the grain. Well, in reference to them, those Hebrews, That's why the book of Hebrews was written. If you go through this from chapter 1 and have this perspective of the audience, you can understand every word that this writer wrote and why. He broke this topic down to them so that they could understand how serious this was and how it all aligns back to the scriptures and is not blasphemy or heretical. So after chapters 1 through 10, as he breaks down how Messiah fulfilled the Torah and the prophets and show completely how this all aligns to the word, he's now expressing the importance of faith, because this is what these new believers are going to have to live through. And as we start in chapter 11, this is what you're going to be reading. Now, you see, what happens in Christianity is that they just often just jump to chapter 11 because it's obviously a chapter about faith. And then they just start talking about faith. But because this new covenant is not truly understood, most don't truly understand what these people needed to walk in faith in regards to. When you actually understand the context, you can really appreciate what it is that you're reading and what this whole book is talking about. The receivers of this letter are actually the true pioneers, because they were the ones walking in a way that was different than everything else before them. And they did not know where it was leading, and they had to trust that they were doing the right thing. And the most amazing thing is that in this hour that we are in, we are very much like them, except that the religion that we're moving away from, it did not come from Yah, but it is influenced from tares the Messiah prophesied of. So as we read on in the book of Hebrews, we're going to see an emphasis on faith. And it's important that you understand why. He's going to build them up on the importance of having faith. So let's continue reading the book of Hebrews and understand what he's saying. Hebrews chapter 11. Now faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. For by it the elders obtained a good testimony. By faith we understand that the worlds were framed by the word of Elohim, so that the things which are seen were not made of things which are visible. Hebrews chapter 11 verses 1 through 3. Okay, so like I said, this is about faith. This verse is not the definition of faith, but it's a description of what faith does. Faith treats things that we hope for as a reality. For instance, we have faith in Yah's promises, so his promises are a part of our reality. Evidence means proof. Faith itself proves that what is unseen is real, such as believers' rewards at the return of Messiah. So when verse 2 speaks of the elders, these are the believers of the Old Testament that obtain righteousness through adherence to the Torah. They obtained a good testimony, meaning Yah's approval. And as verse 3 states, we see that faith understands that though we can't see Yahuwah, we know that he created all visible things. And we will go through the chapter as he writes about the different examples of faith. Let's keep reading. By faith, Abel offered to Elohim a more excellent sacrifice than Cain, through which he obtained witness that he was righteous, Elohim testifying of his gifts, and through it, he being dead still speaks. By faith, Enoch was taken away so that he did not see death, and was not found, because Elohim had taken him. For before he was taken, he had this testimony, that he pleased Elohim. But without faith, it is impossible to please him. For he who comes to Elohim must believe that he is, and that he is a rewarder of those who diligently seek him. By faith, Noah, being divinely warned of things not yet seen, moved with fear, prepared an ark for the saving of his household, by which he condemned the world and became heir of the righteousness which is according to faith. Hebrews chapter 11 verses 4 through 7. In verse 4, he is explaining about Abel. Abel's sacrifice was acceptable to Yah because of his faith, and was therefore declared righteous. In verse 5 and 6, it shows that Enoch was taken away because of faith, as we know from the book of Enoch, but also Genesis chapter 5 says, and Enoch walked with Elohim, and he was not, for Elohim took him. Genesis chapter 5 verse 24. Verse 7 shows Noah. Noah never saw the flood, but believed Yah when Yah told him to prepare for it. He believed Yah despite not really seeing this with his own eyes. He needed faith, and he walked in it. His faith not only saved him and his household, but made him an heir of righteousness. That's all it says. Now, as I continue, I will not explain each example. I hope that you have read these scriptures enough to know what is being mentioned here. If you have not, it should call attention to how much you need to go back and study and read. Understand again that he's writing to people who already have this foundation ingrained in them. Let's continue. By faith, Abraham obeyed when he was called to go out to the place which he would receive as an inheritance. And he went out, not knowing where he was going. By faith, he dwelt in the land of promise as in a foreign country, dwelling in tents with Isaac and Jacob, the heirs with him of the same promise. For he waited for the city which had foundations, whose builder and maker is Elohim. By faith, Sarah herself also received strength to conceive seed, and she bore a child when she was past the age, because she judged him faithful who had promised. Therefore, from one man, and him as good as dead, were born as many as the stars of the sky, in multitude, innumerable, as the sand which is by the seashore. These all died in faith, not having received the promises, but having seen them afar off, were assured of them, embraced them, and confessed that they were strangers and pilgrims on the earth. For those who say such things declare plainly that they seek a homeland. And truly, if they had called to mind that country from which they had come out, they would have had an opportunity to return. But now they desire a better, that is, a heavenly country. Therefore, Elohim is not ashamed to be called their Elohim, for he has prepared a city for them. By faith, Abraham, when he was tested, offered up Isaac, and he who had received the promises offered up his only begotten son, of whom it is said, "In Isaac your seed shall be called," concluding that Elohim was able to raise him up, even from the dead, from which he also received him in a figurative sense. By faith, Isaac blessed Jacob and Esau concerning things to come. By faith, Jacob, when he was dying, blessed each of the sons of Joseph, and worshipped leaning on the top of his staff. By faith, Joseph, when he was dying, made mention of the departure of the children of Israel, and gave instructions concerning his bones. By faith, Moses, when he was born, was hidden 3 months by his parents, because they saw he was a beautiful child, and they were not afraid of the king's command. By faith, Moses, when he became of age, refused to be called the son of Pharaoh's daughter, choosing rather to suffer affliction with the people of Elohim than to enjoy the passing pleasures of sin, esteeming the reproach of Messiah greater riches than the treasures in Egypt, for he looked to the reward. By faith he forsook Egypt, not fearing the wrath of the king, for he endured as seeing him who is invisible. By faith he kept the Passover and the sprinkling of blood, lest he who destroyed the firstborn should touch them. By faith they passed through the Red Sea as by dry land, whereas the Egyptians, attempting to do so, were drowned. By faith the walls of Jericho fell down after they were encircled for 7 days. By faith the harlot Rahab did not perish with those who did not believe, when she had received the spies with peace. And what more shall I say? For the time would fail me to tell of Gideon and Barak and Samson and Jephthah, also of David and Samuel and the prophets, who through faith subdued kingdoms, worked righteousness, obtained promises, stopped the mouths of lions, quenched the violence of fire, escaped the edge of the sword, out of weakness were made strong, became valiant in battle, turned to flight the armies of the aliens. Women received their dead raised to life again. Others were tortured, not accepting deliverance, that they might obtain a better resurrection. Still others had trial of mockings and scourgings, yes, and of chains and imprisonment. They were stoned, they were sawn in two, were tempted, were slain with the sword. They wandered about in sheepskin and goatskin, being destitute, afflicted, tormented, of whom the world was not worthy. They wandered in deserts and mountains and dens and caves of the earth. And all of these, having obtained a good testimony through faith, did not receive the promise, Elohim having provided something better for us, that they should not be made perfect apart from us. Hebrews chapter 11, verses 8 through 40. And wow, that's a lot of examples of faith. You see, those who do not have faith cannot see past the physical world around them. They're limited by their circumstances because they can't see past them, and they become blind to what Yah is doing. But those who open their spiritual eyes can see what it is Yah is doing through their faith in him and his word. They live through faith, and their hopes is in Yah's strength and his faithfulness, in hope that they find the strength to endure. You see, faith, it's never easy, but the more convinced we are that we are in Yah's hands, the more our trust will grow, and the less we will be overwhelmed by doubts and temptations. So always use this chapter to understand those who trust in Yah and showed us what faith looked like. Always. This chapter can be a study about faith by itself when we examine all those examples used. But for this study and purpose, it's more important that you understand why he was writing about faith and the context around it. So let's continue on to chapter 12. Hebrews chapter 12. Therefore, we also, since we are surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses, let us lay aside every weight and the sin which so easily ensnares us, and let us run with endurance the race that is set before us, looking unto Yahusha, the author and finisher of our faith, who for the joy that was set before him endured the cross, despising the shame, and has sat down at the right hand of the throne of Elohim. That's Hebrews chapter 12, verses 1 and 2. You see, in verse 1, when he says a cloud of witnesses, he is referring to all the people of faith that he mentioned earlier in chapter 11. Those are the clouds of witnesses. They are witnesses testifying to the truth of the importance of faith. But then he again points to Yahusha as the author and finisher of our faith. Finisher meaning Messiah has done everything necessary for us to endure in our faith. Even though he knew the agonies of the cross that was set before him, he endured and did not focus on the sufferings, but the reward. So let's continue on reading. For consider him who endured such hostility from sinners against himself, lest you become weary and discouraged in your souls. You have not yet resisted to bloodshed, striving against sin, and you have forgotten the exhortation which speaks to you as to sons. My son, do not despise the chastening of Yahuwah, nor be discouraged when you are rebuked by him. For whom Yahuwah loves, he chastens, and scourges every son whom he receives. If you endure chastening, Elohim deals with you as with sons. For what son is there whom a father does not chasten? But if you are without chastening, of which all have become partakers, then you are illegitimate and not sons. Furthermore, we have had human fathers who corrected us, and we paid them respect. Shall we not much more readily be in subjection to the Father of spirits and live? For they indeed for a few days chastened us as seemed best to them, but he for our profit, that we may be partakers of his holiness. Now no chastening seems to be joyful for the present, but painful. Nevertheless, afterward it yields the peaceable fruit of righteousness to those who have been trained by it. That's Hebrews chapter 12, verses 3 through 11. You see, these set of verses are so important. Verses 3 and 4. For consider him who endured such hostility from sinners against himself, lest you become weary and discouraged in your souls. You have not yet resisted to bloodshed, striving against sin. He's telling them to consider this comparison. The comparison being that though Messiah died, this community of Hebrews that received this letter, they had not yet suffered deadly persecutions. Verses 5 and 6. My son, do not despise the chastening of Yahuwah, nor be discouraged when you are rebuked by him. For whom Yahuwah loves, he chastens, and scourges every son whom he receives. You see, this is going back to the lesson in Proverbs chapter 3, verses 11 and 12. He is teaching about Yah's discipline that he demonstrates through his love. This is extremely important for us because we have to know how to endure and deal with Yah's chastening. Every time bad things are happening to us, it doesn't mean that it's actually all bad. Yah could be gearing us and preparing us for him. Do not despise the chastening of Yahuwah. Verses 7 through 9. If you endure chastening, Elohim deals with you as with sons. For what son is there whom a father does not chasten? But if you are without chastening, of which all have become partakers, then you are illegitimate and not sons. Furthermore, we have had human fathers who corrected us, and we paid them respect. Shall we not much more readily be in subjection to the Father of spirits and live? You see, sons, they're naturally disciplined out of love by their fathers. They should accept and learn from this discipline. For most of us dads, this is the point of the discipline. We discipline our sons so that they learn their lessons and they don't repeat them. We want them to learn. The sons that reject this chastening and they go against it and they never try to understand and they build hostility with their fathers because of the chastening, they never learn and they never grow. But real fathers, we discipline our children. Yah is the same way. Yah disciplines us because he wants to make us better. Now, if they weren't chastened, that would mean that they were illegitimate and they were never part of the inheritance. But because they are, they will be chastened. He was explaining that believers should not only endure Yah's discipline, but they should be readily in subjection to Yah and how he is dealing with us. Verses 10 and 11. For they indeed for a few days chastened us as seemed best to them, but he for our profit, that we may be partakers of his holiness. Now no chastening seems to be joyful for the present, but painful. Nevertheless, afterward it yields the peaceable fruit of righteousness to those who have been trained by it. Okay, so he's still speaking about chastening. Though a father disciplines their child for a while, as they see fit, it is for the child's benefit. Yah's discipline is the same way, as he writes. It's for our profit. Yah disciplines us with our future in mind, and he's preparing us for him. With every trial, he is molding us into his holy people, set apart for his good purposes. If we accept it and learn what he's trying to teach us, then we grow. As he said, no chastening is joyful while you're going through it, but afterward the result brings peace and righteousness if we go through it and make it through. I can attest to the truth of this personally. I have different sons. Most of my sons, they deal with the chastening, and as they're chastened, they learn from their lessons and they grow. The oldest one, he never wants to learn from the chastening, and he harbors regret because of the chastening, and he never grows, and he's doing the worst. And here's the thing, if you're that way with your own parents, you're definitely not going to understand it when Yah's doing it to you. That's why honoring your parents are part of the commands. It teaches you how to honor Yah. If you're struggling with challenges though, I did make a video about this recently. You can go to this video and it talks about this. It might help you. Let's continue. Therefore, strengthen the hands which hang down, and the feeble knees, and make straight paths for your feet, so that what is lame may not be dislocated, but rather be healed. Pursue peace with all people, and holiness, without which no one will see Yahuwah. Looking carefully, lest anyone fall short of the grace of Elohim, lest any root of bitterness springing up cause trouble, and by this many become defiled, lest there be any fornicator or profane person like Esau, who for one morsel of food sold his birthright. For you know that afterward, when he wanted to inherit the blessing, he was rejected, for he found no place for repentance, though he sought it diligently with tears. Hebrews chapter 12, verses 12 through 17. He is now speaking words of encouragement, trying to push them on in faith and being strong. Verses 12 and 13, he's borrowing language from Isaiah chapter 35, verse 3. He's telling them to renew their spiritual strength. In verses 15 through 17, he's telling them that as they walk in this faith, they should watch for 3 dangers. 1, falling short of Yah's grace, meaning refusing Yahuwah's way of salvation and his provision for their needs. 2, allowing the root of bitterness to grow in their assembly. And 3, becoming immoral or profane like Esau, not truly appreciating what Yah has done and worshiping him in any way that they want. What you're reading here is him closing this letter, encouraging these Hebrews to walk true to this faith in strength. Let's read more in this chapter. For you have not come to the mountain that may be touched, and that burned with fire, and to blackness and darkness and tempest, and the sound of a trumpet and the voice of words, so that those who heard it begged that the word should not be spoken to them any more. For they cannot endure what was commanded. And if so much as a beast touches the mountain, it shall be stoned or shot with an arrow. And so terrifying was the sight that Moses said, I'm exceedingly afraid and trembling. But you have come to Mount Zion, and to the city of the living Elohim, the heavenly Jerusalem, to an innumerable company of angels, to the general assembly and church of the firstborn, who are registered in heaven, to Elohim, the judge of all, to the spirits of just men made perfect, to Yahusha, the mediator of the new covenant, and to the blood of sprinkling that speaks better things than that of Abel. Hebrews chapter 12, verses 18 through 24. Okay, in these verses, the writer is contrasting the Mosaic covenant with the new covenant by contrasting 2 mountains, Mount Sinai and Mount Zion. At Mount Sinai, the Israelites received the law from Yah with fear and trembling, while Yah displayed his awesome power. He's speaking about what's in Exodus chapter 19 through chapter 20. Now, in contrast, these new believers have come to heavenly Jerusalem on Mount Zion through Yahusha's blood. They haven't got there yet, but this is the promise that they're waiting for, and this is how they're coming to him. Remember, they know the promises like what Zechariah prophesied in Zechariah chapter 14. This is what they're all waiting for. In this segment, the writer is making the contrast between 2 covenants strong and clear. He is making sure that these new believers understand clearly that this is all a part of prophecy and promises. Please remember that these new believers, they're pioneers, they're trailblazers. They are being schooled and walking in this new belief that is demonstrated by faith and not works. Let's finish this chapter. See that you do not refuse him who speaks. For if they did not escape who refused him, who spoke on earth, much more shall we not escape if we turn away from him who speaks from heaven, whose voice then shook the earth. But now he has promised, saying, Yet once more I shake not only the earth, but also heaven. Now this, yet once more, indicates the removal of those things that are being shaken, as of things that are made, that the things which cannot be shaken may remain. Therefore, since we are receiving a kingdom which cannot be shaken, let us have grace by which we may serve Elohim acceptably with reverence, and in the fear of Elohim, for our Elohim is a consuming fire. Hebrews chapter 12, verses 25 through 29. As he begins to close this letter, he is once again exhorting the readers of this letter to not reject Messiah's way of salvation. In verse 25, as he tells them to not refuse Messiah, who speaks from heaven, he contrasts it to the Israelites who were judged for not believing in Yah's promises, like we see in Numbers chapter 14. Just like that, we will be judged for our disbelief. In verses 26 through 28, as he speaks about shaking heaven and earth, he explains that the earth shook at Mount Sinai when he was establishing his people. But in the latter days, as Yahusha explains in Matthew chapter 24, verse 29, the earth and heaven will shake. Immediately after the tribulation of those days, the sun will be darkened, and the moon will not give its light. The stars will fall from heaven, and the powers of the heavens will be shaken. But as he explains in verse 28, the kingdom of Yah will not be shaken, for it will endure throughout all eternity. And he ends it with, for our Elohim is a consuming fire. And he's just bringing back to remembrance that our Father will judge this world and the people, bringing back remembrance of the Torah in which it says, for Yahweh your Elohim is a consuming fire, a jealous El. Deuteronomy chapter 4, verse 24. You see, after explaining this whole new covenant to them, he made sure he reminded them of Yah's judgment, because you do not want to be on the wrong side of it. And that's why I'm making these videos, because you don't want to be on the wrong side of the judgment that's coming, all because you are attached to the doctrines of Satan. Let's close this up and finish the last chapter of this letter. Hebrews chapter 13. Let brotherly love continue. Do not forget to entertain strangers, for by so doing, some have unwittingly entertained angels. Remember the prisoners as if chained with them, those who are mistreated, since you yourselves are in the body also. Marriage is honorable among all, and the bed undefiled, but in fornicators and adulterers Elohim will judge. Let your conduct be without covetousness. Be content with such things as you have. For he himself has said, I will never leave you nor forsake you. So we may boldly say, Yahuwah is my helper, I will not fear. What can man do to me? That's Hebrews chapter 13, verses 1 through 6. And so as he's closing this letter, he's just exhorting them to walk in the way of the Torah with a circumcised heart. He's going back and telling them to keep these commandments. He reminds them of the assurance Yah has told them, like in Genesis chapter 28, where Yah spoke to Jacob. Behold, I am with you, and I will keep you wherever you go, and will bring you back to this land. For I will not leave you until I have done what I have spoken to you. Genesis chapter 28, verse 15. Or like he reminded Israel when he established them, be strong and of good courage. Do not fear nor be afraid of them. For Yahweh your Elohim, he is the one who goes with you. He will not leave you nor forsake you. Deuteronomy chapter 31, verse 6. He exhorted them to hold on to this promise and live through it and believe it, so we can then walk in strength and say, Yahuwah is my helper, I will not fear. What can man do to me? This we see from Psalms chapter 27, verse 1 and Psalms 118, verse 6. You see, if we walk in the assurance that Yah has told us that he will never leave us or forsake us, then we should be able to trust in him and have no fear. And you see, as these new believers were now about to walk in this new thing that has been established, this confidence and assurance was necessary, as it still is for us today, because we aren't fighting for something new, we are fighting for the truth. Let's keep reading. Remember those who rule over you, who have spoken the word of Elohim to you, whose faith follow, considering the outcome of their conduct. Yahusha the Messiah is the same yesterday, today, and forever. Do not be carried about with various and strange doctrines, for it is good that the heart be established by grace, not with foods which have profited those who have been occupied with them. We have an altar from which those who serve the tabernacle have no right to eat. For the bodies of those animals whose blood is brought into the sanctuary by the high priest for sin are burned outside the camp. Therefore Yahusha also, that he might sanctify the people with his own blood, suffered outside the gate. Therefore let us go forth to him outside the camp, bearing his reproach. For here we have no continuing city, but we seek the one to come. Therefore, by him, let us continually offer the sacrifice of praise to Elohim. That is the fruit of our lips, giving thanks to his name. But do not forget to do good and to share, for with such sacrifices Elohim is well pleased. Obey those who rule over you, and be submissive, for they watch out for your souls, as those who must give account. Let them do so with joy and not with grief, for that will be unprofitable for you. Hebrews chapter 13, verses 7 through 17. Verse 9 is precisely a testament of today. It says, "Do not be carried about with various and strange doctrines, for it's good that the heart be established by grace, not with foods which have not profited those who have been occupied with them." That is exactly what is happening today. Too many people being carried away by strange doctrines. In verse 10, when he says we have an altar from which those who serve the tabernacle have no right to eat, for the bodies of those animals whose blood is brought into the sanctuary by the high priest for sin are burned outside the camp. Understand, the altar is used to describe the sacrifice of Messiah. On the Day of Atonement, the high priest did not have the right to eat the sacrificed animal because it had atoned for the people's sins. Instead, it was burned outside the camp. The believer today in this new covenant has a sacrifice, that is, Yahusha the Messiah. He atoned for the sins of humanity with his death as the Passover lamb. But unlike the high priest of the old covenant, believers receive their sustenance from Messiah in a symbolic way through their belief in him. As Yahusha told us in John chapter 6, "Most assuredly I say to you, he who believes in me has everlasting life. I am the bread of life. Your fathers ate the manna in the wilderness and are dead. This is the bread which comes down from heaven, that one may eat of it and not die. I am the living bread which came down from heaven. If anyone eats of this bread, he will live forever. And the bread that I shall give is my flesh, which I shall give for the life of the world." John chapter 6, verses 47 through 51. You see, in verses 12 and 13, when he says, "Therefore Yahusha also, that he might sanctify the people with his own blood, suffered outside the gate. Therefore let us go forth to him outside the camp, bearing his reproach." Understand, to be outside the gate, it was considered a disgrace to the Yahudim because it meant being separated from the community. The writer is telling these believers to take on Messiah's reproach or disgrace, as he referenced earlier in chapter 11, verse 26. Esteeming the reproach of Messiah greater riches than the treasures in Egypt, for he looked to the reward. Hebrews 11:26. The writer's command to go forth to Messiah was a command to abandon the ways of the old covenant that they were formerly under as they tried to atone and establish themselves before Yah. This new faith will be outside the camp because the others who rejected Yahusha would also reject them. You see, the reason why this series has been made is because of how people have been carried away into various and strange doctrines. We have this book of Hebrews literally explaining exactly what the change in the law is and how the new covenant is applied. But we have these strange doctrines that have been carried over from the early church fathers to this day that tells believers that the actual change in the law is all of the law, and our Father no longer requires obedience to his Torah. He was exhorting these followers to stay in the truth, and that truth stands to this day. Stay away from these various strange doctrines. In verse 14, "For here we have no continuing city, but we seek the one to come." They are always looking towards the promise of the eternal kingdom, the new heaven and new earth with New Jerusalem, the eternal promise. In verses 15 and 16, "Therefore by him, let us continually offer the sacrifice of praise to Elohim, that is the fruit of our lips, giving thanks to his name. But do not forget to do good and to share, for with such sacrifices Elohim is well pleased." You see, though the sacrifices according to the Torah, they are now obsolete, believers are still to offer spiritual sacrifices which include praise, supporting the brethren, and sometimes even their own lives. Let's finish this book. Pray for us, for we are confident that we have a good conscience, in all things desiring to live honorably. But I especially urge you to do this, that I may be restored to you the sooner. Now may the Elohim of peace, who brought up our Adon Yahusha from the dead, that great shepherd of the sheep, through the blood of the everlasting covenant, make you complete in every good work to do his will, working in you what is well-pleasing in his sight, through Yahusha the Messiah, to whom be glory forever and ever. Amen. And I appeal to you, brethren, bear with the word of exhortation, for I have written to you in few words. Know that our brother Timothy has been set free, with whom I shall see you if he comes shortly. Greet all those who rule over you and all the saints. Those from Italy greet you. Grace be with you all. Amen. That's Hebrews chapter 13, verses 18 through 25. You see, as verse 20 writes, now may the Elohim of peace, who brought up our Adon Yahusha from the dead, that great shepherd of the sheep through the blood of the everlasting covenant. Understand, Yahusha is the great shepherd of the sheep, having laid down his life for them and us. And he reminds them that through Yahusha's blood of the everlasting covenant, he will continue to make intercession for us. The new covenant is an everlasting covenant and will never become obsolete like the Mosaic covenant before it. And as he closes, he exhorts them to walk in this truth and to endure. And this is what we must also do as well. And this is the book of Hebrews. This book is literally a training manual for the new covenant. And if we read it in full, we can understand just how absolutely false this doctrine of rejecting the Torah is. When we read the scriptures from the mindset of a Gentile, while ignoring the Torah and the culture of the people who are writing and reading these scriptures, we can truly see just how false the religion of Christianity is. It really is a completely different religion than the scriptures. They are actually a different version of the Pharisees that the Yahudim were against. Simply, they're tares. This letter was written to trailblazers of our faith who were walking in something new that the people of their day rejected. The Pharisees and Sadducees were the religious leaders of their day, and they thought that because of their status and acceptance among the people, they were the ones that were in truth. So much so that they were against the very tool of redemption that the God that they said that they were serving sent, and they were against the movement that Yah put forth. It's the same way in Christianity. Christianity is the largest religion in the world, and because of its influence and dominance, people look at you as a heretic for speaking against it. And just like the believers did back in those days, when they had to be against that false religious movement and stand on what Yah said, we are doing the same again. Christianity, this religion of tares, they are the modern day Pharisees who seek to come against us, not for introducing something new, but in fact going back to what the truth actually is. They speak against us because we actually want to serve Yah and do what he says. And because we are ones trying to live by his Torah, it holds a mirror to them that they don't actually want to look through. So instead of dealing with their beliefs and what the word says, they want to attack us. And we will see as these end times move on, these attacks will become greater. Believe me, it will be Christians that want to persecute us, thinking that they're serving Yah, the same way the Pharisees were against Yahusha and his followers. From the beginning of this series, everybody that did not want to understand were quoting scriptures from Paul because they didn't understand Paul and what he was actually saying. They just wanted to argue. Christians, they like arguing and walking in pride, even though they know themselves they're confused on certain things. They won't allow themselves to feel that way, and they'll just attack you so they can defend their beliefs. It's not actually about proving themselves to be right, but if they can talk you down and make you look bad, then they can justify their falsehoods. That's what they do. If they really were about real communication and really understanding the truth, then they would talk in peace and really try to understand what the person is saying. But the majority of these people have only attacked, and it's because attacking makes them feel better about themselves. Be careful of the pride of Christians. Either way, understand the book of Hebrews is a book that brings clarity to what has changed in the law. And if you really understand that it wasn't about being obedient to Yah's commands and his following his laws and statutes that he put in place for our benefit, that you understand that that was not the issue, then you will not be taken by these false doctrines. Understand the change of the law that they were now under was now accepting the sacrifice of Messiah as atonement for their sins and no longer going to the Levitical priest for atonement. This was a completely new idea, and it was radical. And this whole New Testament that you will read comes from this understanding that these new believers, they were going through. I hope now that this book has been read from beginning to end, you can go back and study the book of Hebrews and really understand what's being communicated here. And you can see why the religion of Christianity does not go over this book. I encourage you to discuss this book with any of your Christian friends and family. Ask them if they understand the book of Hebrews, and I guarantee you will be able to gauge the influence that they are under. Whenever you're talking to somebody about the law, ask them to summarize the book of Hebrews. Such a clear and direct book that brings absolute clarity to the word has been avoided by the largest religion in the world while this one book brings clarity to those who read it and study it. And of course, you do need an understanding of the Old Testament as well if you're going to understand it. So please, in your examination, please really review this major cover-up, and you can see that the enemy has been aggressively keeping you from our Father. Read and study the book of Hebrews. Accept the new covenant our Father has established through the death and resurrection of his Son. You do not need the blood of goats and rams for atonement. You only need the blood of Messiah and to believe on him. Love and obey our Father and his word. Align your life to his ways and commands. Obey him and be set apart unto him. Reject this lawless religion of Christianity and be ready for the kingdom, because you must see it by now that the kingdom of Yahuwah, oh, it's truly at hand. Please be ready for it and be blessed. Hallelujah. Praise Yah. Okay, thanks again for watching. This has blessed you. Please don't forget to like it and share this video with others. Please share this series with any Christian friend that you have that thinks that they're still under the law. Have a discussion with them so they can really understand this, and maybe more dialogue can be had about this topic. If you have not done so already, please don't forget to subscribe to this channel. Yah willing, I upload every Friday. Also, please don't forget to follow this ministry on Facebook and Instagram, as well as on my website, truthunedited.com. As always, I'd like to thank all of you who support this ministry. Your contributions truly bless this ministry and make a huge difference. I'm thankful for your love and your support and letting Yah lead your life. Thank you for listening to Yah's call on your heart. Always be blessed. Okay, thanks again for watching, everyone. I love you all.